I didn't plan to ruin a wedding that cost more than my entire orchard. But when someone spends months stealing from you, smiling in your face, and calling it collaboration, well, eventually you stop being polite and start getting creative. And let me tell you, 40 hungry pigs can be very, very creative. So here's what happened. I've been running my orchard for almost 3 decades now, tucked right along the edge of this manicured, picture-perfect country club that looks like it was designed for magazine covers and trust fund weddings, the kind where people say rustic charm, while holding a glass of champagne that costs more than your weekly groceries. My place. It's the real thing. 23 varieties of heirloom apples, each one planted, grafted, pruned, and babbied by hand. We're talking Honeycrisp, Winesap, Arkansas Black, the kind of fruit that actually has flavor, not that waxy grocery store nonsense. This land is my life, my retirement plan, the reason I get up before sunrise even when my back is screaming at me to stay in bed. And for years, me and that country club, we had an understanding. They hosted their fancy weddings, their charity galas, their corporate retreats, and my orchard sat right next door, looking all scenic and authentic, like something out of a postcard. Guests would wander over to the fence line, take pictures, maybe ask a question or two, but nobody crossed that line. There was respect. Until Ethan Carlisle showed up. Now Ethan. He was new money energy wrapped in a tailored suit, slick, confident, always talking like he was pitching something. He came in as the club's new event director, and suddenly everything was about elevating the guest experience and curating authenticity, which, in his world, meant slapping a premium price tag on anything that looked remotely rural. One afternoon, he walks onto my property like he owns the place. No call, no warning, just steps over the gravel path and starts talking. "Hey there," he says, smiling like we're already friends. "I've been looking at your orchard, and I think we could do something really special together." I should have known right then, but I listened. He starts going on about farm-to-table experiences, how his clients want real, local produce, how my apples would be the centerpiece of these high-end events. And for a second, I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe we can actually work something out. Then he tells me his price. $2 per bushel. I just stared at him. 2. I said, "You realize these sell for 15, right?" And he doesn't even flinch, just shrugs like it's no big deal. "Well, sure," he says, "but you'd be getting exposure. Our guests are high profile. This could open doors for you." Exposure. Yeah, exposure doesn't pay property taxes. So I told him no. Straight up. No negotiation, no counteroffer. Just no. And that's when his smile changed. It didn't disappear, it just got thinner, sharper, like I'd just inconvenienced him. "Well," he said, adjusting his cuffs, "I'm sure I can find something similar elsewhere." And I said, "Good luck with that." That should have been the end of it. But a few weeks later, I started noticing something off. At first, it was small. A few apples missing from the trees closest to the fence. Nothing crazy. I figured it was deer. Happens all the time. You lose a little here and there, part of the job. But then it got worse. Whole clusters gone overnight. Branches stripped clean like someone had gone through with a checklist. And here's the thing. Animals don't work like that. They don't pick the best fruit. They don't move methodically. They don't come back night after night like they're on a schedule. So I set up cameras. Didn't tell anyone. Just mounted a few trail cams along the fence line and waited. And what I saw, man, it wasn't deer. It was Ethan. Him and 3 of his catering staff, slipping through a gap in the hedges after dark, carrying baskets, flashlights, moving quick but careful, like they'd done it before. They went straight for the ripest trees, the premium varieties, filled up their baskets, hauled everything back toward the club kitchen like it was their own damn inventory. I must have watched that footage 10 times, each time getting a little angrier. Because it wasn't just theft, it was calculated. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a system. So the next day, I walked over there. Didn't call. Didn't schedule a meeting. I just showed up while they were setting up for some big corporate event. White tents, linen tables, staff running around like ants. And there he was, Ethan Carlisle, clipboard in hand, barking orders like he was directing a movie. I walked straight up to him and said, "We need to talk." He glanced at me, annoyed at first. Then he recognized me, and that smile came right back. "Hey, orchard guy," he said, like he couldn't remember my name. "What can I do for you?" I pulled out my phone, hit play, and held it up. He watched himself on that screen for a solid 5 seconds. Didn't blink. Didn't react. Then he looked at me and shrugged. Okay, he said. And I honestly didn't know how to respond to that. And I repeated. Yeah, he said, lowering his voice like he was explaining something obvious. Look, we needed product. You weren't interested in partnering. So we improvised. Improvised. That's what he called it. Breaking onto my land and stealing my harvest, improvising. I said, you've been taking thousands of dollars worth of apples. And he just waved his hand. Come on, he said. It's a few trees. You've got plenty. This is basically surplus. Surplus. That word stuck with me. Because to him, it wasn't about value, it was about entitlement. He looked at what I built over 30 years and decided it was extra, disposable, something he could just take because it made his events look better. I told him he needed to pay me. Not just going forward, back pay for everything he'd taken. And that's when he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a fake polite one. A real laugh. Or what, he said. I said, or I go to the police. And he leaned in just a little closer, voice dropping, smile gone now. Then you'll be in a legal mess you don't want, he said. Shared property boundaries, agricultural runoff, implied access. Trust me, you don't want to go down that road. He straightened up, clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies. Tell you what, he added, I'll still offer you the deal. $2 per bushel. Think of it as making things official. I stepped back, looked him dead in the eye, and said, you've got 1 week. No payment, no agreement. I pressed charges. He didn't even respond, just turned around and went back to his event. And that's when I knew he wasn't going to stop. And sure enough, he didn't. The theft didn't slow down, it escalated. By mid-season, it wasn't just a few baskets at night. It was organized, coordinated, like they had shifts. Entire rows getting stripped before sunrise. My orchard, my life's work, being treated like a free warehouse for someone else's profit. And standing there one morning, looking at another tree picked clean, I realized something. If he wanted an authentic farm experience, then maybe it was time I gave him one. All right, before I tell you what I did next, we gotta pause for a second, because this right here, this isn't just some petty neighbor dispute. This is where people get themselves into real trouble without even realizing it. According to standard procedure, when someone crosses onto your land without permission and takes anything of value, that's not sharing. That's theft, plain and simple. Doesn't matter if it's apples, tools, or even something growing naturally on the property. Ownership doesn't magically disappear just because it's outside or looks abundant. Now, from a legal perspective, what Ethan was doing could stack up into multiple issues real fast. Trespassing, theft of agricultural goods, and potentially even commercial fraud since he was profiting off stolen products. And here's the kicker. Once money enters the picture, especially at the scale of high-end events, it stops being a civil misunderstanding and starts leaning into criminal territory. But here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't just about law. This is a psychological trap. Guys like Ethan don't start by kicking down your door, they test boundaries. First, it's a lowball offer. See if you'll undervalue yourself. When you say no, they don't walk away, they reframe the situation in their head. Suddenly, what's yours becomes an used, extra, wasted potential. That's how they justify taking it. And once you don't immediately shut it down hard, they escalate. Slowly, confidently. Because in their mind, if there are no consequences, then there's no crime. That's the game he thought he was playing with me. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't interested in playing by his rules anymore. So yeah, once I understood exactly what game he thought he was playing, I stopped reacting and started planning. Not loud, not emotional, just quiet, patient, the kind of planning you do when you've spent 30 years working land and you know timing is everything. Because here's the truth, guys like Ethan, they don't learn from warnings. They learn from consequences, public ones. And wouldn't you know it, the universe handed me the perfect opportunity. End of September, peak season. The orchard was at its best, fruit heavy on every branch, color just right. And right next door, the club was gearing up for their biggest event of the year. Not just any wedding, his daughter's wedding. And when I say big, I mean ridiculous. 300 guests, valet lines stretching down the drive, imported flowers, string lights hanging like something out of a movie, and the centerpiece? A $10,000 wedding cake sitting under a white canopy like it deserved its own security detail. And yeah, You already know. The dessert menu? Apple tarts. My apples. Stolen apples. I stood at the edge of my property that morning, coffee in hand, watching the setup, and I remember thinking, this guy really built his biggest moment on top of everything he took from me, like there would never be a bill to pay. That's when I made the call. Now, I don't just grow apples. I raise heritage pigs too, Gloucestershire Old Spots, Mangalitzes, not your average farm animals. These things are smart, strong, and when they smell food, they don't hesitate. 40 of them. And they know my land better than anyone. So I waited. Didn't rush it. Didn't make a scene. Just waited until the ceremony wrapped up, until the music started, until people had drinks in their hands and plates on the tables, until everything looked perfect. Then I walked over to my pasture gate, and I opened it. At first, nothing. Then one pig caught the scent. Then another. And then, it was like a switch flipped. 40 pigs, snorting, squealing, charging straight through the hedgerow like a freight train made of mud and attitude. They didn't hesitate. Not for a second. They hit that reception like it was a buffet designed specifically for them. Which, honestly, it kinda was. Tables went first. Linen, centerpieces, gone. Then the appetizers, gone. Fruit displays? Absolutely destroyed. And that cake? Man, that $10,000 masterpiece lasted maybe 30 seconds. One pig knocked the base, another climbed halfway up the table, and suddenly you've got frosting, fondant, and pure chaos sliding straight into a feeding frenzy. Guests started screaming. Not politely, full panic. Chairs tipping over, people running in every direction, heels sinking into grass, drinks flying. It was like watching a perfectly choreographed disaster unfold in real time. The band stopped mid-song. Staff froze. And right in the middle of it all, there's Ethan. Red-faced, yelling, completely losing control of the situation he thought he owned. I could see him from across the lawn, phone pressed to his ear, pacing like that was somehow going to fix it. Then my phone rang. I already knew who it was. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "What did you do?" he shouted. No greeting, no pretense left. I leaned against the fence, watching one of my pigs chase a groomsman who had clearly made some poor life choices with his footwear. And I said, calm as ever, "I'm not sure what you mean." "Your animals," he snapped. "They're destroying everything. Get them out of here." I paused just long enough. Then I said, they must have smelled something. "What?" "My apples," I said. "You know, the ones that keep disappearing." Silence. For a second, just pure silence. And then he hung up. But it didn't matter. Because by that point, there was no fixing it. The reception was done. Not delayed. Not salvaged. Done. Guests were covered in mud, food was gone, decorations destroyed, and somewhere in the middle of all that, the illusion he built, that polished, curated version of authentic, just collapsed. Now here's where it gets even better, because chaos is one thing, but consequences? Those take a little longer to show up. The next day, I got a call from the club. Different tone this time. Real polite. Real careful. Turns out, when insurance companies start asking questions, they don't care about aesthetics. They care about facts. And once it came out that the food being served included stolen agricultural goods, yeah, that claim got denied real quick. No coverage. No payout. And with 300 guests, a destroyed event, and a reputation on the line, that kind of loss hits hard. Then came the lawsuits. A couple guests claimed injuries during the whole pig situation. Slips, falls, one guy swore he got aggressively nudged, which, to be fair, he probably did. And suddenly, the club wasn't dealing with a messy event anymore. They were dealing with liability. Guess who they pointed to first? Ethan Carlisle. Within a week, he was gone. Fired. Quietly, but not quietly enough. And the same people who once backed him? They were calling me. Apologizing. Offering to make things right. They wanted stability. They wanted control again. So they offered to buy my entire harvest. Full market price. Plus damages for what had been taken. No negotiations. No attitude. Just signatures. And I took it. Not because I needed their approval, but because that was the deal I should have been given from the start. But here's the thing. I didn't move the pigs. Not far, anyway. They're still right there near the fence. Healthy. Federal watching. Because sometimes, people don't learn from contracts. Sometimes, they need a reminder. And trust me, nothing reminds you faster than 40 pigs with a taste for stolen apples. So what's the takeaway here? Because yeah, it's a wild story, Pigs crashing a luxury wedding, a guy losing his job, a whole operation falling apart in one afternoon. But if you strip all that away, what you're really looking at is something a lot more common than people want to admit. The lesson here is boundaries don't fail all at once. They erode. Slowly, quietly, one small exception at a time. It starts with something that feels almost harmless, a lowball offer, a dismissive comment, someone testing how much you value your own work. And if you let that slide, or even if you just don't shut it down clearly enough, some people will read that as permission. Not maybe, not possibly permission. And that's exactly what happened here. Ethan didn't wake up one day thinking, I'm gonna run a full-scale theft operation. No, he built up to it. First he tried to underpay me, see if I'd fold. When I didn't, he reframed the situation in his head, told himself the fruit was extra, that I wasn't using it properly, that he was somehow justified in stepping in. That's how entitlement works. It doesn't feel like stealing to the person doing it. It feels like correcting an imbalance. And once that mindset locks in, it's dangerous, because now they're not negotiating with you, they're overriding you. From a legal perspective, this is where a lot of property owners get caught off guard. People assume that if something grows naturally, or if it's near a shared boundary, it becomes a gray area. It doesn't. Agricultural products are property, period. And the moment someone takes them without permission, especially for commercial use, they've crossed a line that can carry serious consequences. But here's the part nobody talks about enough. Just because you're legally right doesn't mean the situation resolves cleanly. You can call the police. You can file reports. You can start that whole process. And sometimes you should. But that road? It's slow, it's messy, and it doesn't always stop the behavior immediately. So what do people do? They tolerate it. They hope it stops. They convince themselves it's not worth the trouble. And that's the trap. Because while you're hesitating, the other person is getting more comfortable, more confident, more aggressive. And eventually, you reach a point where you're not just protecting your property. You're trying to reclaim control. Now, let me be clear about something. What I did, that's not in any handbook. You're not going to find a legal guide that says, if your neighbor steals from you, release livestock into their event. That's not standard procedure, not even close. But it worked. Why? Because it flipped the dynamic. Up until that moment, Ethan had all the leverage. He was taking what he wanted, ignoring consequences, operating like the system would protect him if things escalated. And then suddenly, he was the one dealing with chaos. Public chaos, financial chaos, reputation damage. That shift? That's what forced resolution. Now, does that mean you should go out and recreate something like this? No. Let's be real. There are risks, legal and otherwise, that could have gone very differently. But the principle underneath it? That matters. The lesson here is, if you don't enforce your boundaries, someone else will define them for you. And once they do, it's a lot harder to take that control back. There's also something else going on here that's worth paying attention to. This whole idea of authenticity being packaged and sold. You hear it all the time now. Farm to table, locally sourced, organic experience. But a lot of the time, it's just marketing. It's an image. And in this case, that image was built on something real, something that actually took decades to grow. And then someone else tried to cut themselves in without respecting the work behind it. That's not collaboration. That's extraction. And people do this everywhere, not just with farms. Creative work, small businesses, independent contractors, same pattern. Undervalue, pressure, take, justify. So if you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, I've seen something like that before, you probably have. The details change. The setting changes. But the behavior? It's the same. Which brings me to the last point. Consequences don't always look the way people expect. Sometimes it's a lawsuit. Sometimes it's a contract. And sometimes it's 40 pigs and a ruined wedding. Now I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have gone straight to the police? Tried to negotiate again? Taken the loss and moved on? Or would you have found your own way to make a point? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And if you enjoy stories where people push too far and finally get checked, stick around. There's plenty more where this came from.